Okay, calm down. You got nervous, man. You got nervous, man. Okay, calm down.
We have a great guest coming on. We're just going to bring her onto the stream. Susan Kang, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Can we hear you? Are you muted? Oops.
Yes, I'm muted.
Okay, great.
Hopefully
Thank
now
you.
I'm muted.
Thanks for unmuting. Yes. And Susan is an associate professor of political science at John Jay College, a member of the Executive Council of the Professional Staff Congress, CUNY, Faculty and Professional Staff Union at CUNY, member of the NYC Democratic Socialists of America. And she's joining us to speak out against a Medicare, quote unquote, reform for public sector worker retirees that's being pushed by NYC Mayor Eric Adams as a cost-saving measure. But tell us why it's not something that should be embraced, Susan.
Okay, so just a little bit of background.
Yeah.
Back under the de Blasio administration, I don't know how the exact details, but at one point, de Blasio administration's like, oh, hey, do you want like back pay and like increases for your workers? 'Cause if so, we'll have to find cost-saving measures by taking away from the money that we would give to retirees. And not naming names, but people were like, oh, sure, let's do it. So
Name
municipal
names.
So I think that this included like the UFT, for example. But I'm not here to criticize unions because I think union leadership is making the best possible choices that they think they can. Right.
Okay.
So, right now we're kind of in a moment of like rock and hard place. And I think union leadership is trying to do what they can, given sort of the parameters that city government is offering to them, which, the parameters are not like things that I would agree with. So another little bit of background, our mayor who, he might have a lot of swagger, but he's not really all that great at, managing city budgets. So currently, I know that there is a $4.9 billion surplus budget. In addition to that, our city is bringing in more in tax revenues than projected. So all the austerity you hear about, when you hear about like, $15, $30 million cuts to things like our libraries, our, millions of dollars in the cuts to our school system, a lot of this austerity is imposed. Like it's ideological. It's not like a budget balance sheet thing, no matter what anybody tells you. Okay, so there's money out there, but there's this need to find like, I believe the number is $600 million cost savings. So the idea is that Mayor Adams has actually started with de Blasio. It's been a couple of years now, but Mayor Adams has sort of run with this football that we're going to balance budgets on the backs of our retirees who are public sector workers. And public sector workers, which I am one, so I've been at CUNY for 15 years now. So I'm a mid-career professional. We often get paid less than our private sector counterparts. And part of the reason for that is that we get things like pensions. So I'm a pension haver. Nice. So don't be too jealous. And part of our pensions include things like a continuation of the same kinds of medical care that we've had as active service members. And right now, so maybe you saw this in the New York Times, but the Biden administration is actually cutting back on Medicare Advantage plans because we know that they defraud the government, right? They don't provide care and they're often just like full of it. But anyway, at this exact moment, Mayor Adams is trying to push about 250,000 retirees. So municipal retirees, like people like, if you're a conservative, you should be mad because these are like our first responders, right? Like our firefighters, our EMTs, people who do sanitation, like social service workers, teachers. They're being pushed onto Medicare Advantage plans with no choices, right? No ability to stay on the traditional Medicare plan. And so I'm no expert on health economics or health policy, but I'm a rank and file member of my union. And traditional Medicare is like, that's what we all want, right? When we talk about Medicare for all, we talk about, people who take Medicare, they're providing you care and it's at a reasonable price. The prices are negotiated by Medicare and the costs are all provided and covered by the government, right? So it's not for profit. And Medicare Advantage is kind of like a Jedi mind trick, right? The idea is it sounds like Medicare, so it must be better than Medicare because it's an advantage. But in fact, Medicare Advantage is not Medicare. It's like a way to trick seniors, kind of like, those spam where they say, oh, click this link. Right. It's like a click this link for seniors where they say, oh, it's just like Medicare, but in fact, it's a for-profit driven enterprise. Okay, so to back up a little bit more, initially there was a proposal to move towards a Medicare Advantage plan to force all city retirees onto this plan. But some unions fought back. Now, some unions agreed because they said that, we do need to participate in a cost-saving measure, but about 26 unions, including the PSC, the Professional Staff Congress, which I'm a part of, they voted against it. And so this is sort of like an interesting thing because there's a split within the sort of the Municipal Labor Council, which is sort of this central body of city. I'm sorry, my cat is really loud, and if I brought
it's
him
your
in here, he'd be
cat?
louder.
I thought your kids were playing a game.
No,
Okay.
no, my kids are really much more quiet and less loud. Okay, yeah. So 26 municipal unions, including the PSC, they were like, no, we're not going to accept this. So even though a lot of the big unions did go along with it, what matters was that there's also independent organizing happening from retirees. And so the PSC, we mobilized, we got our members, we mobilized with other retirees to like start bugging our city council members and saying, we can't accept Mayor Adams's plan to like push these punitive Medicare Advantage plans that are for profit. They make their money by denying care, right? It's so mind-boggling. I'm also like, in addition to being a DSA member and a union member, I'm also a scholar of human rights. So it really sort of, when you add that profit to the right, which is healthcare, it really does destroy it. So they make their money by denying care. So could you imagine if you're a retiree and you need a procedure, but you have to go through this like managed organization that's saying, I don't think you really need that scan or that, treatment or that chemo, right? So they're making decisions, bureaucrats who are responding to not stakeholders, to shareholders to make decisions about your healthcare, not doctors. So basically, because of this resistance, this organized response which include the PSC and other unions, we've been able to stop this from happening. But now we're sort of at a pivotal moment where there is something called an option C. And option C is something that Mayor Adams could allow, which would basically make all the municipal retirees and their families, give them default to participating in this Aetna-run Medicare Advantage plan. But then it would allow for retirees to opt out, right? To participate in that traditional Medicare program that, people fought for,
right.
That people delayed and deferred their compensation and other benefits for because they were expecting that when they retired. And that's, when you and I, the Bernie folks, when we talk about Medicare for All, that's sort of the model that we're thinking of. And so this would basically still allow for cost savings. So I'm not an economist, but evidently it would still lead to about $33 million worth of cost savings. And there's still plenty of money that the city has, and it's like, budget surplus to cover the shortfalls. And there's all sorts of ways that the city could engage in cost savings, right? So again, I'm not a health economist, but based on what I've seen, a lot of these costs come from hospital costs, and hospital costs for like the same procedures, they vary wildly. And so,
it's always presented, austerity is always presented as something that's not ideological and it's just a pragmatic thing. But we all know that that's not true. All of these things are choices and framing and decisions.
All these things
and policy
are
choices.
The result of very particular and specific political decisions about whose interests matter and whose interests don't, right? And like, there's all these problems with medical care in this country, which we can't get into right now. But like, there's no reason that we should just let hospitals decide by themselves what procedures should cost, right? Like that's not something that happens in other countries.
Right.
Your previous guest, John Pilger, was talking about privatization of NHS. Well, this is a universal fight. It's not, even though it seems like I'm talking about something very specific to New York public sector retirees, which is not that huge, it's 250,000 people. It's actually a broader fight because this is happening across the country. This is happening in other states. And it's happening under a variety of Democratic and Republican leaderships at municipal, state, county levels.
And as HHHEE writes, Ralph Nader's podcast talks in depth about the Medicare Advantage, which he calls Medicare disadvantage. You guys may want to use that.
It's the best term, right? I mean, we do use it, the term Medicare disadvantage, right? But the thing is that it's a little bit difficult to get, well, we'll call them active members, to think about this in the long term, because one of the things that the retirees activists tell me is that we're all future retirees, right? If we're lucky, and we'll need healthcare the most at that end part of our life, right? Like, so I read somewhere once that we're most expensive like the year before we die, you know, and I've had 2 kids, right? So our medical care costs increase as we get older, and like our ability to get certain kinds of care will affect our quality of life. And public sector workers, right? If this sort of is allowed to happen carte blanche, then we'll see like Medicare itself starting to slip away. And like, there's very few things that make up the US safety net, right? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, and like to allow what little we have, this very like hole-filled hammock of a social safety net to just like continue to tatter away, will just leave Americans more and more vulnerable. And so if we think about it, like every stage of life is just increasingly challenging for people. Like I'm a parent, like I'm not in like childcare stage anymore, but like summer camp expensive, after school's expensive. I'm not even thinking about college costs, right? But college costs are through the roof. And then when they're done, housing costs are ridiculous, right? And then I got to worry about like, maybe I'll die because I won't be allowed to have a very preventable, medical procedure that would save my life, you know, I don't know, in 30, 40 years. So we see how inhumane this is. Anyway, I don't want to be just a downer because it's really easy to be a downer. But, you know, if your listeners are interested in being part of this struggle, there's lots of things you can do, particularly if you're New York City based. Or not, you know, you can always mean tweet Eric Adams.
Yeah.
I'm pro this. Okay?
Yeah, everyone loves to mean tweet Eric Adams.
Yeah, that's what Twitter exists, right? Not for unnecessary takes. It's to mean tweet powerful people. Okay, so you can send a letter to the mayor, the OLR commissioner, and the city council. So if you've got a city council representative, then write to them. Or if you're in the metro area, you know, and you might be someone with a relationship to municipal city workers, or if you're someone who just likes, you know, public servants. And we have a link on our website, which is psc-cuny.com. And you can find like sort of little action letters. So we do it all for you, right? You don't have to do too much work on your own. We also have, if you are in New York City or if you like to yell at City Hall, which I 10 out of 10 recommend, we'll have a rally this Friday at noon in front of City Hall, which I believe is 250 Broadway. On the Murray Street Broadway area, to protest this, right? Because this is not just about 250,000 retirees. It's about everybody's healthcare. And if you're not active in your union, get active. And if you're not in a union, organize one. And
what date is that? I just want to, in case people watch this, I don't want them to turn up if they're watching this later. What date is Friday?
I think it is. Sorry, now I got to check my phone.
Okay.
31st.
Yeah, so, okay, March 31st is the protest.
Right, because the mayor has until April 1st to make a decision about whether he'll allow this option C to happen, which will allow public sector retirees to opt out of Medicare Advantage and keep their traditional Medicare. Like, I hate that we have to even use like a descriptor. Like, it should just be there's Medicare and then everything else is just
Medicare
trash.
And not Medicare, right.
Right. So, yeah, but Medicare is like trusted. So that's why they're able to sort of use this term to like trick people.
Right. Well, thank you, Susan. Anything else you want to mention?
Okay. This is very embarrassing, but I have started a podcast with another person in DSA. So it's not as great as your show. We're like on a different level, but it's Left on Red. And you can find us on Spreaker and everywhere else that you see podcasts. And it's just 2 organizers based out of Queens talking about organizing and news and fun stuff too, like lifting weights.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta lift some weight.
It's good to see you, Katie.
You too.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye, Susan. Okay, guys, we're going to bring on our next guest. That was wonderful. We're going to bring on our next guest. He's been on the show a bunch. I know everyone here loves him and supports him and cares about his struggle. And I'm bringing on to this virtual stage, Steven Donziger. Hi, Steven.
Hey, how are you?
Good, you? Thank you so much for your patience. We ran long.
No problem. Good to see you.
You too. So for people who don't know, Steven Donziger is an advocate, writer, and public speaker on human rights and corporate accountability. As a lawyer who's won a historic $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron, which poisoned water in the people of Ecuador. However, not only was this judgment not paid, but Steven Donziger was penalized with house arrest and time in prison. And on Monday, the Supreme Court turned away his recent appeal. So, Steven, first of all, I'm sorry and outraged. Tell us what your appeal was and why they turned it down.
So just to remind people, I'm the only person in U.S. history ever to be prosecuted by a private corporation. I, for many years, worked with indigenous peoples in Ecuador's Amazon. We went a pollution judgment against Chevron, which had dumped billions of gallons of cancer, causing waste onto ancestral lands. Chevron retaliated by suing me in the United States. The case in Ecuador is still alive, and it's been affirmed on appeal by 6 appellate courts. But they wanted to go after me and try to force me off the case because of my successful lawyering. And they filed a civil lawsuit against me in New York.
One second, I'm really sorry. Brett, is there I don't hear an audio thing, but a lot of people are saying there's an audio thing. I don't know if it's me or Steven. So apologies, Steven. Brad, is it me? Let me just quit everything else. I'm sorry. Let me shut this out. Sorry about this. This will be cut out, obviously. Can you guys hear me now? Is it not doing what it was doing before? Because I'm shutting other windows. Hold on one second. Sorry again. Okay. How is this now? Okay. It's working back now. Okay. Great. Okay. I'm sorry. Do you want to just start again with your reminder of what had happened? That you're the only lawyer to.
Yeah, the appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm a lawyer, and it had to do with the fact that I was targeted with the nation's first private corporate prosecution, which led to almost 3 years of detention. This began in the summer of 2019 after I'd helped indigenous peoples win a $10 billion, historic pollution judgment against Chevron in the Amazon of Ecuador. And that case has been affirmed on appeal by 6 appellate courts. But Chevron went after me in a civil case in New York, trying to knock me out of the case. And that, led to a series of legal maneuvers where they demanded my computer. I appealed an order where they, it's unprecedented, unheard of for a lawyer to have to turn over his confidential case file to opposing counsel. And while I appealed that order from a pro-Chevron judge, the judge charging with criminal contempt of court for not obeying an order I was appealing to a higher court, that led to my almost 3 years of detention on a misdemeanor contempt charge, completely unfounded charge. It was rejected by the U.S. attorney for prosecution. It was filed by this judge, Judge Kaplan. And ultimately, after the case was rejected for prosecution, Judge Kaplan appointed a private Chevron lawyer to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government. That's why I was locked up. And he also appointed a judge, a colleague of his, a good friend of his, Loretta Preska, who's a big leader of the Federalist Society. And there was what I believe was a collusive effort by Chevron, its lawyers, these 2 judges, and this Chevron prosecutor to basically silence my advocacy by detaining me on false charges. And, this just ended about a year ago. Meantime, I appealed this whole.
And you went to jail.
And I went to jail 45 days in Danbury, and I was,
prison, I should say, right?
Prison, yeah. Federal prison.
And she also, one more thing, I just have to add this because I think it just shows you what type of person we're dealing with or system. But Preska said that you needed a 2x4 between the eyes when she was delivering your sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
proverbial. She did call it the proverbial 2x4.
Proverbial 2x4, as if I'm the one violating the rule of law. I mean, the whole thing they did targeting me was a violation of the rule of law. In any event, I appealed this to the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately, and the court today, or I should say yesterday, turned down my appeal. They didn't actually consider the appeal. We filed a petition for certiorari. They wouldn't take the appeal. They take very few appeals.
Sure.
My appeal got a lot of traction because there were several very prominent lawyers, I would say an all-star team of lawyers from the left, the right, the middle, who backed me because what they did was so offensive to the rule of law. It really was beyond politics. It turns out that 2 justices, conservative justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh of all people, wrote a dissent of the decision to not accept my appeal. and it was, I thought, beautifully written, completely supportive of me, and basically said the whole case is unconstitutional and illegal. And as Gorsuch said, the Constitution does not tolerate what happened here.
Yeah.
But what was shocking to me, I mean, first, I was appreciative of the fact that that dissent was written.
Right.
What was really shocking to me is that none of the other justices joined them. I mean, all you need is 4 justices for a case to be accepted on appeal. I'll point out that none of the 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, stepped up for me, or, forget me, stepped up for the rule of law, because it's so outrageous. And then the other conservatives, Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett, also didn't join them. So I find it kind of surprising that only 2 really supported the idea that this private corporate prosecution should be overturned. Now,
and that they were the conservatives. That's the weird thing, or maybe not the weird thing.
I mean, look, you might disagree with their principles and their philosophy, and I do, but they are, I think, principled when they believe in something. They will go after it. And we've seen this in a negative way, in my opinion, in many cases over the last 2 years. I think the liberal justices are much more transactional. And, and I'll also say this, people talk about a liberal conservative split on the Supreme Court, 6 conservatives, 3 liberals. I mean, those are just labels. I mean, what really happens is on social issues, there is a split. On economic policy issues, on corporate issues, there usually isn't.
Right.
They're all walk in lockstep.
Yeah.
So, anyway, bottom line, Katie, is that private corporate prosecutions, as a result of this refusal to take my appeal, are now essentially legalized in the United States. I mean, I'm the only one. We're raising resources to fight this. We don't want this to happen to me again. It could, or anyone else. We look at what's happening in Atlanta with 42 people charged with domestic terrorism, most peaceful protesters of the Cop City Police Academy. We are seeing an increasingly aggressive corporate police judiciary assault on advocacy, I should say progressive advocacy in this country. And it's frightening. And my case is a key component of that. And, it could happen again. And we need to be aware of this case. We need to be aware of the battle that is ongoing to make sure it doesn't happen again. And of course, the larger battle to make sure Chevron pays the judgment in Ecuador. It's using this case to try to avoid paying the people, the indigenous peoples in the Amazon that it poisoned, which really prompted this whole assault on me.
And can you just remind people what they did, Chevron?
Sure, thank you. So Chevron, Texaco, which is now Chevron, Texaco went into Ecuador's Amazon in the 1960s, built hundreds of oil wells, and over roughly a 25-year period, deliberately dumped, as part of its engineering design, billions of gallons of cancer-causing toxic waste onto indigenous ancestral lands, into waterways that indigenous groups and non-indigenous farmer communities were relying on for their drinking water, for their bathing, and their fishing. They essentially took an area that had been pristine, an ecosystem that had been pristine for millennia, and wrecked it in 10 years. And the end result down in Ecuador is that hundreds, thousands of people have gotten sick. Many have gotten cancer and died. Chevron lost the legal case in the court of its choosing down in Ecuador. They wanted it there. They accepted jurisdiction. And instead of paying the judgment, they went after me here in the United States, resulting in my detention and resulting in this, really, I would say, disastrous abandonment of the rule of law by our own Supreme Court, and allowing a corporation to act in the name of, they didn't just prosecute me, but they acted in the name of the United States government. I mean, you had a Chevron lawyer on a legal brief saying, it was like Rita Glavin, United States of America, like she was a real prosecutor. And my detention, by the way, even if I had done something wrong, and I don't believe I did, in any event, I was appealing it. I wasn't thumbing my nose at the court. I was acting as a responsible lawyer. And, they locked me up. No lawyer charged with my contempt charge had ever been locked up pre-trial in the history of our country. I spent over 2 years and 2 months on a misdemeanor with a maximum sentence of 6 months. I spent over 4 times that amount prior to my trial, locked up at home with an ankle bracelet. And then she still gave me, Judge Preska still gave me the maximum 6-month sentence. And I ended up, almost 3 years in detention on a charge where the maximum sentence is 6 months. It was a pure oil industry driven political retaliation against a successful environmental lawyer, justice lawyer, and human rights advocate. By the way, I have a family, I have a wife and a son who's now 16. And this didn't just hurt me, it hurt my family,
Of course.
hurt my son, hurt everyone who cared about me and cared about the people of Ecuador.
Right.
And deprived my clients of one of their main advocates for a number of years. I wasn't able to travel. Still can't travel, by the way. They won't return my passport. But look, the larger issue is, our Supreme Court is duty bound. It's our highest court. Their mission is to protect the rule of law. And what we're finding more and more with this decision and others is the court is actually not doing its duty. It's not protecting the rule of law, and it is abandoning the rule of law for purposes of expediency, politics, corporate power, influence, whatever the reason. I'll point out that I'm litigating against Chevron now for 28 years.
And they haven't paid a penny to the people of Ecuador.
But they've been donating roughly $200,000 a year to the Supreme Court Foundation, which very few people know even exists. There's a foundation that raises millions of dollars a year for the ostensible purpose of preserving the history of the court and promoting the rule of law. How ironic. And so Chevron, their general counsel is going to all these gala dinners once a year with the justices. The people of Ecuador don't get that opportunity. It's inappropriate. That foundation, by the way, should be shut down. But why do I have a case against Chevron before the Supreme Court, and Chevron's donating money to the Supreme Court Foundation, and Chevron's top lawyer sits on the board of trustees of the Supreme Court Foundation? It's all wrong. It's at a deep level. And look, I respect the rule of law. I actually believe there are a lot of good judges in this country. There's a lot of space in the court system in this country to do good, to at least try to achieve justice with fair judges. But increasingly, we're running into problems because there's so many right-wing activists, ideologically driven judges now in the federal judiciary, several of whom are on the Supreme Court right now, that it is very, very difficult to use courts to achieve justice, to carry out, the aspirations of justice that so many millions of Americans have. So, my case needs to be pushed. By the way, we're going to international fora. I've got a team of international lawyers ready to help. And we're not giving up just because the U.S. is not in alignment with international law and the rule of law. We are going to try to hold our courts and our government accountable for what has happened here.
Yeah, so that's what's next. If people want to get involved, we're raising funds to do this, and we need help. If you're kind enough to go to our website, freedonziger.com, there's a donate button. We love every donation, no matter how small. If you can only give $1, we use the fundraising as a way to build political support, to build a movement around justice for the people of Ecuador, justice for advocates. It's not just me, but there's so many lawyers now under attack by this new corporate playbook, using RICO, for example, against environmental campaigns, targeting individual lawyers as a way to avoid dealing with meritorious claims, go after lawyer, trying to leave, these vulnerable clients defenseless. So, there's a lot at stake here with what's happening to me. That matters to a lot of other people, matters to our profession, matters to our democracy, just matters in terms of what kind of world we want to live in the United States. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. And thank you for all that you do. And anything you want to say to these liberal judges?
It's just disappointing. You can't work your whole life, and this is a lesson not just for judges, I think, but for everybody, in institutions, trying to get ahead. And then when you finally get there, you just abandon what you fought all your life to do. Why would you get to this highest level where, no one's going to get rid of you? Become a truth teller. Like, really do your job. Uphold the law regardless of the powers and influences that are being put upon you. So I just find, look, I get people have different judicial philosophies, but I don't see differences with the idea that a judge-driven private corporate prosecution by the very company that lost the civil judgment in Ecuador against the lawyer who won the judgment, locking him up. I don't see how there can be an argument about that. That's not consistent with the rule of law. So I'm disappointed in the liberals, and I hope they do a better job going forward. But the larger point is we're not giving up. We're going to keep fighting and wherever we can in other courts to hold this government accountable for its violations of human rights and the rule of law as regards lawyers on this case fighting Chevron for justice in the Amazon.
And can Merrick Garland do anything, or he's not going to do anything? I mean, is that the...
Sorry, by the way, for that light back there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the light of justice.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking you look very angelic. Yeah.
I'm on the West Coast, and I'm not used to having daylight at such a late hour. In any event, of course, Merrick Garland could do something. I mean, as you know, because you helped so much, Katie, when I was detained, but we had asked Merrick Garland for a number of months to intervene and block this weird animal, this private prosecution, and he wouldn't. And, when we appealed to the Supreme Court, we were hoping the DOJ, his agency, would write a brief supporting us. They didn't. They supported Chevron and Judge Kaplan. So I'm disappointed in Merrick Garland. I would say the same thing to him that I just said about the 3 liberal Supreme Court justices. Is like, why work so hard your whole life to get to that position and not really, implement the law and the rule of law without fear or favor? And what that means is you got to help vulnerable people. I'm an individual. I'm not even in a law firm. Okay.
You've been disbarred.
And I've been disbarred. I worked for years out of my apartment. My clients are even, they're far more vulnerable than me.
Yeah.
I mean, they have no money and very little support. The indigenous peoples of the Amazon who are being poisoned by Chevron's pollution.
And they wanted you to hand over your communications with them, which would have put them at risk.
It would have put their lives at risk. And I'll say, we can't have a system, okay, where there's sort of one rule of law for the wealthy and powerful and a different one for the vulnerable and the marginalized. And that's what I'm seeing over and over again in this case and others. And it takes courage. It shouldn't, but it does take some measure of courage by Merrick Garland, by judges, not just at the Supreme Court level, at other levels, to really adhere to the law without fear or favor and apply it equally. There should be equal justice under the law. And obviously I've been singled out and targeted, and the Supreme Court didn't help me. By the way, I still want to just mention again, I appreciate Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh for taking a principled position.
Yeah.
I really do. I want to recognize that. Okay, we're not going to just throw out the whole court on every issue here.
And who thought it would be them? But yeah,
they did good.
They did the right thing
in this one instance, but it's really disappointing that the other 7 did not. I actually thought they were going to take the case and that they were going to rule in my favor 9-0. I don't know what the argument is.
Yeah, what was their argument?
I don't know because
they didn't take
when
it.
they deny a case, they don't really write about it unless there's a dissent, and the dissent supported me. I don't know. They take very few cases. Maybe they just didn't think this was a good vehicle because I'm an unpopular person in those circles.
Yeah, they don't want to piss off their
and judges like
foundation.
Yeah, and they like to protect each other. Maybe they want to protect Judge Kaplan. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, because Preska was a Bush appointee, right? But Kaplan is a Clinton appointee.
That's exactly right. They're both
of
the same philosophy.
Right.
And also remember that this is pure speculation. It's probably just ridiculous to mention. But, Justice Sotomayor worked in the same building with Judge Kaplan for many years. She comes out of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York. And you feel it when you're in the New York courthouse. I mean, the judges just take care of each other.
Yeah.
And that might have had something to do with it.
Right. You think that there's some I mean, I guess it is. It's because people are corrupt and power hungry, but you think that maybe there'd be some professional courtesy or solidarity with you as a former lawyer. I mean, I guess they just are accepting they're just accepting the smeared version of you, but you'd think that maybe they would get that this is not something that should be done to lawyers.
You would, wouldn't you? But,
Yeah.
there's been a whole one thing I've noticed with how I've been treated by the bar. It's dominated by the corporate firms. The
Right.
corporate firms make their money representing wealth and power and corporations, and they hate it when upstart lawyers who don't, especially ones who had, I come out of the privileged part of the profession. I graduated from Harvard Law School, and they really hate it. They just hate it so much to see someone with that background fighting for justice for the marginalized. I mean, and not only fighting, but doing it successfully. It drove them crazy. And they just it felt very like psychologically terrifying, I think, to them.
Yeah. And
And
a precedent.
I always felt this targeting of me was coming from a weird, obviously there was a political purpose to destroy me and destroy the case, but it was also like there was this weird kind of emotional, psychological
Yeah.
element in their lawyers where they just really were after me.
Yeah.
As was Judge Kaplan. I mean, there was just gratuitous attacks on me, and they have been for years. I'm still under attack. I mean, they pay Google $1 million a year to just put propaganda out about how I'm a criminal.
Right. So that comes up first in your search.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
it's ongoing again, which is why
Disgusting.
we're still fighting and need support. But yeah, it's an intense existence. It's complicated, but luckily I have a ton of support from independent journalists like you, from my family, from the 68 Nobel laureates, 120 NGOs. There's some 10 members of Congress have written letters. So like, it's not like I'm alone, but it is
David and
It was
Goliath.
targeting me, and it's something I deal with pretty much every day.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to say about East Palestine or any other issues, just because you're an activist around?
Sure. Are you able to see me with that crazy light?
Yeah, it's a little, I mean.
Should I move to?
Yeah, can you move a little bit?
Yeah. Hold on.
Steven, and I feel like one time that we were doing this, like my friend's kids came in the room.
Oh yeah.
That was really fun. I was talking to you and Roger Waters, and my friend's adorable kid came on. Yeah. So we've always had.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'll say this about East Palestine. What a tragedy. It was not an accident. Okay. That was the result of deliberate decisions by Norfolk Southern Rail to not invest in braking systems, technology, sensors on the tracks that would have prevented the accident. It is a case, I consider it a corporate crime. And if I were a prosecutor, I would open an investigation because I think there are potential criminal charges against company executives for what happened. I know we're not going to talk about it in too much detail today, but I just want to point out, if you take my bizarre private corporate prosecution and detention, and then you throw in the Cop City issue where 42 protesters have been charged with terrorism, face 35-year sentences. And then on top of that, you throw in the Ohio train derailment, where I actually believe hundreds, if not thousands of people over the years are going to become afflicted with diseases, including cancer, and face the possibility of premature death. You put all those things together, what do you have in common? You basically have corporations running roughshod over the people, with government not doing its job of protecting the average person. And I would say, I'm an old dude now. I've been doing this a long time. I'm 61. The thing I've noticed the most over the trajectory of my career is the increasing deepening of corporate influence over our governmental structures and institutions, and it's not just the president, it's all three branches of government. It's penetrated the judiciary, and you are seeing increasingly bold manifestations of corporate power expressed through judges, the police, and other government organs in a way I did not see in the 1970s and 1980s and even the 1990s. I mean, it was always there, but it's really in full bloom right now. And I think we need to understand how to connect the dots. between these various phenomena to understand the framework of what's really going on in this country. It's not fun to watch, and it's scary, but we can deal with it. We just have to see it for what it is and organize to deal with it.
Well, thank you. Let's do a show where we do that.
Love to do that. And we
Yeah.
get a couple of other people who know
Yeah.
more about, but it's but thank you, Katie, for all
Thank
you do.
you,
and
of
for inviting
course.
me.
Yeah, thank you. And keep up the good fight. And we'll put a link to your website in the YouTube description.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Steven.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, remember, we're doing a call-in after this. And if you watch this live, you're so in luck. If you're watching this later, to see the full John Pilger interview, which is amazing, I got to say, go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Also, that's not Steven's house, by the way. People are commenting on Steven's house. It's not his house. But yeah. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say, except thank you so much for coming to this show. It was a great one. Wow, like jam-packed. Thank you for people for the super chats. Love talking to Steven Donziger, so brave. Love talking to Susan Kang, and love talking to John Pilger, of course. And if everyone who liked this, it's really nice that people are saying how much they liked it. And I would love for you to give a thumbs up and also subscribe. Those are free ways to support the show. You just subscribe, you hit the subscribe and then the bell, and you also can just give it a thumbs up. That's so easy. We got some really great, that's so nice. Lana Michi, love this chat community. Yeah, we got some really great clips that came out. So make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. we do the show, so you'll never miss it. Turn on your notifications. And I think that's it. We'll see you next week. And patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Subscribe, like, become YouTube members. And thank you, Bradley Bloom from behind the screen. Thank you. And also thank you, Phantom Esfanta, for the live clipping. Okay, I'll see you all next week. See you at Call-In, though, right now.
Okay, I'm down.